Hey, everybody. Welcome to Wake Up Patriots. I'm Larry Swikart in for Ed Henry here. And man, have we had a busy week. I have to admit, I was wrong. I did not think they would get rid of Joe Biden, but they did. We have a new candidate, and it is Kamala Harris. And the deal apparently was if Joe would step down as the nominee, he could stay president. They were threatening him with the 25th Amendment. And of course, if he had to step down as president, that would cause all sorts of problems. By the way, did you know this? A little history here, since I am a history professor. Did you know there were 6 times in our history where we did not have a vice president? The first was when William Henry Harrison died. And you got John Tyler. And then the second was when Taylor died, and you got Fillmore. Then, of course, when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, Andrew Johnson came in, but Johnson did not appoint a vice president. Neither did Tyler or Fillmore. When James Garfield was assassinated, his vice president, Chester Arthur, came in for almost 4 full years and did not appoint a vice president. When McKinley was assassinated, Teddy Roosevelt came in and did not appoint a vice president. And lastly, when John Kennedy was assassinated and Lyndon Johnson, the vice president, became president, he did not appoint a vice president. So it's fairly common in our history for a president to die in office or be assassinated, and the new vice president not to appoint a vice president. Anyway, just a little history, something I thought I would throw out your way. So they had to be looking at the clock this whole time. You know, if you followed me here on Wake Up Patriots for the last month or so, I've been talking about the clock. And at some point, the clock becomes real. And we're getting very, very close to that point. For example, the counties, not the DNC, not the states, the counties print the ballots and send them out to all the early voters. They have to go out around October 7th. Each county is different. Each state has different laws. But it's around October 7th that these early ballots go out, because they must be postmarked before the election, theoretically, to get counted. And I think Pennsylvania has just upheld a law to that effect. They need to be postmarked before the election to get counted. Well, if you're going to send them out on October the 7th, everybody on that ballot, I'm not just talking the president, vice president, or senators, I'm talking about everybody from county commissioner to justices of the peace who may be voted on, to dog catcher, whoever it is, mine inspector. All of those people need a chance to look at the ballot and to make sure their names are spelled correctly and that they have them running for the correct office. I mean, people do screw up. So they need to get those ballots at least a week before they are sent out on October 7th. Actually, closer to 10 days. Because remember, if you misspell Bill Jones's name on the ballot, the county has to correct that before printing up all the new ballots. So you've got to allow a day or two for proofreading. So you're back now to around September 25th that the various candidates would have to receive those ballots to proofread them and return them. But if they're going to get those ballots by, say, September 25th, they must be printed quite earlier than that, right? You've got to print them by about September 15th, maybe September 10th, in order to get them in the hands of all of the candidates so the candidates can proofread them. So we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 days right now until that deadline kicks in. Now, if counties, and I don't know every county requirement, I certainly don't know every state law, But if the laws are such that they need to go out before October 7th, say October 1st, you got to do the math and back everything up accordingly. So we're right within about 30 to 40 days of having actual names go on ballots. And after that, they can't realistically be changed. You could swap somebody out, but it's going to start to be almost impossible after about September 25th, when those last round of proofread ballots start coming back to the counties and they begin printing their final ballots for the early absentee ballots. And so you ask, well, what would happen if, let's say, Harris's name is on the early absentee ballots, but somehow they remove her before the actual election? And again, that goes back to a number of state laws. Some states, like Vermont, don't care. As long as she's a Democrat, they'll count any Democrat at the top of the ticket as whoever that name is, right? So if Harris is up there, but she's gone by then, they put in, I don't know, Gavin Newsom. Vermont would just count all those votes for Harris as Newsom votes. Other states do not, like Ohio. So that's a huge deal. You cannot risk having 50 to 60% of your ballots, because that's what percentage of early ballots there were in 2020, almost 2/3. But again, you got to remember, let me back off here. Remember, in 2020, they had about 5 months of these early ballots, as I call it, the 5 months of mules. It's not going to be that long this time. It's going to be about 30 days. Instead of about, 4 or 5 months. So if a name goes out on the early ballots and it's not the same name at the top on election day, many states, such as Ohio, will not count the early ballots for president. They'll count all the other names, but they'll just treat that like it was a bad ballot for president. You can't risk having even 5 or 6 states kick out all of your early votes for president. You can't do that. That's a disaster. Especially if any of those are swing states. You don't want to be doing that. So you see what I'm saying here. The clock's ticking. That's why I think they knew the clock was ticking. And that's why, folks, they have coalesced around Harris. There's not going to be a brokered convention. There's more talk over the weekend that they are going to go with Harris and whomever she names as her VP. And I'm hearing everything from Buttigieg to Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. The thinking with Shapiro is that he might help her win Pennsylvania. There's 2 problems of that. One, the gap in Pennsylvania appears to be getting bigger for Trump. It's almost outside the margin of steal as of right now, margin of fraud. Second, Shapiro may help her a little bit in Pennsylvania, but he's going to hurt her a lot in the other state she needs, which is Michigan. Already the Arab American pro-Palestinian voters don't like Biden, and they're going to like Harris even less if she puts a Jew on her ticket. Just realistically speaking here, that's not going to fly very well. So she has a world of problems coming up here in all these areas. It's clear that the DNC decided to leave Biden in and just go with Harris and not risk an outsider such as Hillary or Newsom. You say, well, why don't they just remove Biden? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, that's chaotic as all get out. Just assuming that you had good intentioned people at the top, which I don't, but assuming that some of these people really have good intentions, okay, switching out a presidential staff, getting used to a new president getting used to all the rigors of being president, which of course Biden didn't do any of that. He napped most of the day. But still, it would take, say, a President Harris weeks to be brought up to speed on actually doing the job of president. That's weeks out of her campaign time, her campaign effort. So I don't see them doing that. I think they're done. I think that Harris is the candidate. I'm not afraid of Hillary or Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom or anybody else, Kevin Costner or something that they want to pluck out of the ether sphere. Now, we did have this issue of funding, and Harris was the only candidate also they could get who could receive all of Biden's funding, which is now something to the tune of, I've seen both $91 million and $200 million. I'm not sure which it is. Supposedly, Harris raised about $80 to $100 million almost overnight. Well, there are real concerns about this. President Trump has filed an FEC, Federal Election Commission lawsuit, challenging this, challenging allowing her to get all of Biden's money. But also the head of the FEC, and I don't have his name handy here, but the head of the FEC, who I think was a Trump appointee, could be wrong, but I think he's a Trump appointee. He says that there's something fishy here, that it looks like the donations came from overseas, specifically from Switzerland, and that they came in very suspicious, mysterious packets of about $1 to $2 million each. I mean, this has financial fraud and money laundering written all over it. What will anybody do? I mean, the question today, always with all of us, oh, so what are they going to do? They're going to do anything? In the past, all they've done is issue fines. They issued a fine to Obama, which he paid, and to Hillary, which she paid for some of these FEC violations. But nothing has ever been as potentially significant as this one, which is an awful lot of money. Now, that said, President Trump can go out there and over a weekend raise $100 million anytime he wants to. And he has not been spending a lot of money. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the Trump campaign has sat on their money pretty well during this time. Back in December, Trump said he did not think Biden would be the nominee. So it's pretty clear that Sally Miles and Chris LaCivita have been sitting on that money precisely for this reason, knowing that it would be a waste of money and time to go out and attack Biden when the real nominee was going to be somebody else, i.e. Harris. So look for them to start spending a little bit of money here and going after Harris. So you're saying, all right, what does that mean now that Harris is the nominee? What has changed, if anything? Well, we'll get into some polling later, as I always do. But except for a Reuters poll, and I'll talk about this in a minute, all the polls still show President Trump up anywhere from 2 to 6 points. This Reuters poll that came out, shock poll. You know how Drudge said, shock poll, Harris leads Trump. Well, it was a Democrat plus 6 sample, and it was a very small sample, meaning they sampled about 100 more Democrats out of under 1,000 people polled. So that's really, really bad polling. But to do a Democrat plus 6 panel is extremely problematic, especially if the electorate right now is tied or even R+1. So, of course, you're going to get Harris up. But within that poll, even there were huge problems for Harris. Trump was way up with the youth vote, and he was also around 21% with blacks. That's not a winning number for any Democrat. I don't care what your name is. Democrats need to get well over 80% of the black vote to have any kind of cushion. And with Trump at 20 or 21%, and don't forget, There's all these other candidates down ticket. We don't talk much about them, but you got RFK Jr., you have Cornel West, you've got Jill Stein, you got a libertarian, you've got some others. They're all going to suck up somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 points of the total electorate, including a number of blacks, a percentage of blacks. I don't know if it's 1, 2, or 5, but the point is Harris is not getting 80% of blacks. She'll be lucky to get 75% of blacks. That's a mortal number for any Democrat. So while this Reuters poll is out, a second poll, an ABC poll came out with the same number. Oh, Harris is up too. Well, guess what? That ABC poll, they just reran the Reuters poll. They didn't do their own polling. They just used the same sample group, the same Democrat overweighting. So you got that surprise, the same number. Anybody shocked? So what do some of the other polls say? We had Forbes with Trump at +6. We have CNN with Trump at +4. We have The Economist with Trump at +3. We have Marist, which hates Trump. They're always an anti-Trump poll. Trump +1. We have CBS with Trump +3. We have the Morning Consult with Trump +2. None other than David Axelrod, Obama's old guru henchman, came on and said, quote, Trump is a substantial favorite, unquote. And to top all this switch to Harris, to top all that off, Obama did not endorse Harris. Isn't that interesting? That he wanted somebody else. Now, one of the guys you should watch is Trump's pollster, a guy named Tony Fabrizio. Personally, I wish Trump would use my friend Richard Barris. I think Barris is by far the best pollster in America, but Fabrizio's not been bad. And Fabrizio had a memo that he sent out earlier last week in which he said that you should expect a slight shift in the polls that would show Harris improving, that she's going to get a bump both from her being named and then when they have the official convention being the nominee there. Now, by the way, remember the clock? It appears that the Democrats are still going ahead with a virtual convention to name Harris early so that they don't have problems with the clock. So she's going to get 3 consecutive mini bumps. One is they just named her the nominee, pulled out Joe and named her. That's one. 2 is she's going to get this virtual convention nomination. That'll be a mini bump. And then 3, she will have the Democrat National Convention, which is usually good for a point or 2. So don't freak, Fabrizio says, when she starts to close the polling gap a little bit, especially nationally. But you have to understand that nationally, what's happening is a lot of Democrat voters are relieved that Biden is out in California and in New York and in Illinois, and they're coming home. You're going to see a big spurt in those states. But that's going to affect the national popular vote. But in terms of the Electoral College, it does absolutely nothing for them. We don't care how much they run up the vote in California and New York. It's not going to change the Electoral College. There was some early talk, oh, maybe Trump can win New York. No, come on. He may get closer. He will get closer, a lot closer, but he's not going to win New York, barring a total meltdown of Harris. So back to Fabrizio. What did he say? Fabrizio said that you can expect 1 or 2 bumps for Harris coming out of all of these activities. But, quote, the fundamentals haven't changed. And that's what Axelrod is also referring to. What fundamentals? Well, Biden's inflation Biden's immigration. You notice now that the networks are trying to say that Harris was not the border czar. Nobody named her border czar. Well, they absolutely clearly did. You can go find it in the White House records and the memos and all this. They're trying to scrub that. They're trying to lie. But she absolutely was the border czar. You've got the border, you've got immigration, you got inflation, you have the terrible economy. It's fine for the top 1%. It's not so good for everybody else who's out there. You have the prospect of war in the Ukraine. I'll speak more about this later with President Trump. Point is, those are the fundamentals. That's what is not changing. And we'll talk in just a second here when I come back from our sponsor break about some of those fundamentals in the swing states. Well, we talked about inflation. We talked about the economy. With Bidenflation, government printing so much money, $32 trillion in debt, the dollar is losing its value. I mean, nobody can deny that. It may be time for you to look at a little more security in your financial future with gold and silver. So we here at Wake Up Patriots have partnered with Colonial Metals Group, and they're going to help you set things up with a safe and secured self-directed IRA. And this is where you have access to all your assets. No matter what happens in the stock market or the government, you got access to your gold and silver. So let the team of experts at Colonial Metals Group help you protect your family's future. They're going to set you up with a special offer with a safe and a free safe, and they're going to set you up with $10,000 in free silver when you open an account with them. So what you want to do is call 800-805-4034. That's 800-805-4034, and that's Colonial Metals Group. All right, so let's talk just a little bit about what's happening in the swing states and what does Harris do that Biden didn't do in the swing states. And the answer is very, very little, if anything. First of all, the notion that Harris will improve polling and matters voting with blacks, it's not out there. Rich Barris has shown extensively that Harris repels black people, that she will do worse with blacks than Joe Biden. And you want to know where we can find that? Go back to the 2020 primary election with Biden and Harris in South Carolina, which has a lot of Democrat black voters. And what happened there? Harris was blown out because James Clyburn, a congressman there, who's sort of the power broker in South Carolina, threw all the black support behind Biden. Blacks, on average, don't trust Harris. They think she is not a, quote, authentic black. And she's of West Indian descent, which is also kind of a turnoff. Let's be honest. There is a small rift between blacks of West Indian descent and African Americans who were born here in the United States. Harris does terrible with the working class of all colors, especially whites, but of all colors, in Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. She loses worse than Biden does with the working class in these areas. And this is beginning to be just a massive, massive advantage for Trump. He always had the working class whites, but now he has added to that working class blacks and Hispanics. And so she is not going to draw those. As I mentioned before, depending on who her vice president is, she may actually do worse than Biden was already doing among Arab Americans in Michigan. So overall, Harris brings nothing to the table, except she energizes the uber libs in California, Illinois, and New York. So let's just run a couple of numbers here. I know numbers are hard to follow here, but in 2020, Biden won. We've got to always put that in quotation marks. Biden won by about 4.5% nationally. 4.5%, or 81 million votes, allowed him to win the Electoral College by a little over 45,000 votes, something under 50,000 votes. That is a narrow win. Trump had just carried 3 or 4 more states. And each of those, Arizona was 11,000, Georgia was about 10,000, Wisconsin was 10,000, Pennsylvania was 100,000. So under 200,000 votes, he would have taken 5 more states. So that's very big. Well, right now, President Trump is running anywhere, all polls except Reuters, President Trump is running anywhere from 2 to 6 points ahead of Harris. Now, what does that mean? Well, again, that's a national vote. And when you run those numbers, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 82 to 83 million Trump voters. Okay. Now, I haven't looked at what Harris's share would be because of all those third-party candidates. We don't know yet what the impact is going to be. The only thing we do know is that Bobby Kennedy seems to draw a lot more off the Democrat side than off of Trump. And so Kennedy's somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 points right now, depending on the poll. With Harris in there, it won't surprise me. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. But it won't surprise me with Harris in there to see Bobby Kennedy somewhere near 10 points on election day. Now, as Barris keeps warning, polling is one thing, voting is another. And you get a lot of people who will go into the voting booths and go, I like Bobby, but I'm not going to waste my vote. I'm going to vote for Harris or Trump or whoever it is. I do think that with Harris on the ticket, there's going to be a higher incentive for a lot of the Bobby voters to just stick with Bobby. And if that happens, and Trump tops out, say, at 52%, I think there's a pretty good chance Harris drops below 48, maybe below 47. But we'll see. At any rate, what does that mean for the Electoral College? Well, a 1-point national win would be about 306 electoral votes for Trump. 2 points would be somewhere between 312 to 320. More than 2 points nationally, you're probably looking at an Electoral College landslide of about 340. Now, we have to be careful with words like landslide. They don't mean what they meant in Goldwater's era or Nixon's era or George H.W. Bush's era, mainly because of the deep bluing of California and New York. A lot of conservatives have just left those states. California, when I last ran the numbers, had gone from about a plus 3 million Democrat advantage to about a plus 4 million Democrat advantage. And most of that is Republicans are just leaving. It's not that they're converting, they're just leaving the state. So you're looking at in a modern terminology, a Trump landslide, if he can get anything over 52% of the national vote. One last thing here to remember about Harris and her candidacy and all this polling. Folks, she has not been dirtied up yet. They haven't begun to hit her with all the dirt and all the attack ads because she wasn't the candidate. this does have an effect. A huge effect, I don't know, but it does have an effect. Negative advertising does work. That's why everybody and their brother uses it, because it does work. So you wait until she has to, after the convention. I don't think they're going to unleash a whole lot of attack ads until the DNC convention. Just wouldn't do any good. But after that DNC convention finishes in mid-August, you're going to see a wave of Trump attack ads on Harris. So she has a lot of problems across the board that Biden didn't have. And the more people see her, I think, the less they're going to be impressed with her. Already you've got groups such as Black Lives Matter and some of the Palestinian groups coming out against her. I'm sure you saw, by the way, that big sit-in the other day in Congress by the pro-Palestinian groups, obstructing justice, obstructing Congress. Why weren't they all arrested and put in jail like the J6 Patriot Day people, huh? Why aren't they in jail? So there are some real issues here. And most important, Kamala has to run on Biden's record. Like I said, she doesn't have a record of her own, and she can't come out and criticize Biden. This is why it's huge that he has stayed as president. If he had stepped down and she became president, she could very quickly say, well, I'm changing course, and thrown out some meaningless but nevertheless symbolic issue changes. Said, see, I'm making a break with the past. And believe me, that would have worked. I mean, I don't know how much, but it would have impressed some people. Well, she's different than Biden, because, you know, Democrat voters always want to think the best, right? So the fact that they have kept Biden as president, in essence, ties Biden like an albatross around Harris's neck, and she can't get rid of the issues of inflation, illegal immigration, the Uke war, and the economy. Those are the four big ones. Well, again, I just want to remind you about our friends over at Colonial Metals Group. You know, you've got to protect yourself against inflation. The very best hedge over time against inflation is gold and silver. Silver, because it's more fungible. That's an economist word that says you can spend it more easily. You can't walk into a grocery store if the money is really, really inflated and put a gold sovereign down on the counter and expect them to make change. But you can put down a dime or a 50-cent piece or a silver dollar. I learned this back in the day when Richard Nixon, of all things, you know, he took the U.S. off gold, but he made it possible for ordinary Americans to own gold. And I went out and bought a whole bunch of gold maple leafs. I think I paid $100 for them when he did that. And I sold them a few years later for $450 a piece. Well, that's what happens when you have inflation like we had with Jimmy Carter. So you at Wake Up Patriots, you want to partner with Colonial Metals Group. They're going to set you up with a secure, self-directed IRA so you can get your money out if you need it, and let these people help you out. They're going to give you a free safe and start you off with $10,000 in free silver when you open an account. So check them out. Go to Colonial Metals Group. Call them at 1-800-805-4034. That's 1-800-805-4034. All right. So I'm going to get into the Secret Service stuff in just a minute. But something came up that I wanted to talk about here. I follow a guy on Substack, a liberal. I call him my favorite liberal, and his name is Noah Smith. I urge you to follow him, subscribe to him. He's a Trump hater, but when he's not trying to talk about Trump's policies, he has some pretty good insights on a lot of things, especially tech, especially the working class, and just work in general. So he's had a couple of columns here about the decline of work effort. And this is really important. I mean, it's one of those pathologies that we see in modern America, which is that people don't want to work. COVID did not help this because it made everybody work from home. Well, some people do, and they're fairly enthusiastic and loyal and honest. Other people play games on their computers. There's a name for this, but they have programs that'll make their mouse move around and make it look to any supervisor who logs in and looks at what's happening, makes it look like they're actually doing something at home. But in fact, it's just a computer program that makes it look like their mouse is moving around. So there's a lot of people kind of opting out of actual work at home and playing games. So anyway, Noah Smith has had this thing for a universal basic income. I don't know if you've heard of this, but this is this kind of quasi-socialist notion. We're just going to give everybody $1,000 a month. You're right. Some cities have actually started to try this. Just going to give people, say, $1,000 a month or some amount a month because they're in poverty. They just need that to get out of poverty. They'll go to work if they can pay for childcare. Arguments such as this. Now, $1,000 a month is a lot if you're in poverty, but $1,000 a month is a very low minimum basic income, especially with today's inflated dollars that we keep talking about, right? So Smith looked at what would happen at a $1,000 a month universal basic income. And the studies that he looked at suggested that 2% of those who receive this would not work at all. In other words, contrary to the goal, which is to provide them the ability to work full time, they just sit back, relax, and take the extra $1,000 a month and not work at all. Now, I know for most of you, this doesn't come as a shock or a surprise. Well, of course, that's what they're going to do. But to many liberals, it really does, because they think, oh, people really, they want to work. It's just they can't because of childcare or transportation costs or whatever. Well, as Smith points out, this $1,000 a month level is extremely low in terms of universal basic income. And what he argues is that, in fact, if you provided any more money, the incentive would be to drop out further. Even fewer people would actually work if you gave them more than $1,000 a month. And so he went on in his Substack to look at a number of reasons people might drop out. And one of the interesting things he found was something called stealth leisure. Stealth leisure. And this was the notion that, as I said, people are really not working when it appears that they are working from home, that they are taking stealth leisure. And this is brought about, he argues, by the internet and cell phones. We all know you guys check your cell phones all the time, right? One study showed that teens check their cell phones 600-700 times a day. Many of you will say, well, I use it for my work. I got to check inventory and this thing. Yeah, come on. We all know if we wanted to, we could cut our cell phones back a lot, our use of cell phones. And by the way, there have been some very good studies on schools, elementary schools and high schools, that have banned all cell phones. And you know what happens? Behavior problems fall dramatically. Bullying falls dramatically. And actual performance in class increases, that students actually learn. Now, I encountered this back at the University of Dayton. It was just starting to come in as I was about to retire here. I retired in 2016, but the iPhone, I think, came out around 2009, 2010, something like that. So I was starting to see phone issues before I retired. And at first it would be this stuff, right? Where they're looking at their phone and then looking back up at you. So I had to then have a rule. I'd say, all right, everybody hold up your phones. They'd all hold up their phones. Hold up your phones. Shut them off now. I'd have to watch them shut their phones off and go, now put them away. And that worked for a while. And then I noticed, I only taught a 50-minute class, right? I noticed all of a sudden students were going to the bathroom more frequently. They almost never had college students get up and go to the bathroom, but they were getting up and going to the bathroom more frequently. And of course, I figured out what they were doing was going out to check their cell phones. So it's a huge problem. Well, anyway, Smith suggests that the internet has become a source of stealth leisure, that people supposedly working from home are using the internet for game playing, for chatting with friends, for anything except work. And I think that's pretty accurate. So it's going to be a problem. And we found now that major businesses are having a lot of trouble with working from home. First place, the work from home, the whole COVID thing has destroyed urban commercial property. That many of these buildings that were being used by companies, people would come into work. They're not coming into work. Well, the companies don't need those buildings. So you're seeing a fairly large commercial real estate. I wouldn't call it a crash yet, but they're down 30 and sometimes 35% in some of these urban areas, as companies just have not been able to convince people to come back to work. It's just not helping. And part of that is this stealth leisure with people doing this stuff on their cell phones. Okay. So again, that guy's name is Noah Smith. He is a liberal. Don't be shocked if you subscribe to him and you go, oh, this guy's bashing Trump. He does that fairly regularly. But he also is very good on productivity statistics. He's a little bit too pro-China and too pro-green for my tastes. But work around him. You're going to find you can get some really good stuff out of him. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Secret Service, because there's some real serious stuff there. I think we all learned in the wake of the Russia hoax that you could not trust the FBI. The FBI is no longer Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., right? It no longer carries that kind of cachet or respect. I don't know any conservatives who respect the FBI anymore. You might remember that Sean Hannity used to go on and on about, well, there's a few bad apples at the top, but the rank and file are good. No, folks. Not one rank and file that I know of either came out as a whistleblower against the Russia hoax or the whole J6 Patriot Day hoax. Not one. Nor did any of them resign and say, no, I can't be a part of this organization that's going to do this kind of garbage. So I think we can all admit the FBI is gone. I would like to see Dan Bongino as the new FBI director, but you need somebody in there who's just going to tear that place apart, rip it down to the nubs, and rebuild it with constitutionally minded people. The CIA, do any of you trust the CIA even before all this stuff? I mean, they took a huge hit with the weapons of mass destruction. And I've got to be fair, I'm a historian, folks. You got to understand that George W. Bush not only got CIA information that there were WMDs in Iraq, He got information from every single intel agency in the world, from the Egyptians, from the Jordanians, from the Russians, from the Chinese, from the Brits, from the French, from the Israelis, and of course from the CIA and from the UN. If there was a group out there that had any intelligence operations at all, they all said there were WMDs in Iraq. So it wasn't just Bush. You can criticize Bush. I think he should have pulled out of Iraq after 90 days of not finding WMDs. I do not fault him. I know some of you are going to hate me for this. I do not fault him for going into Iraq. I fault him for staying. He should have said, well, ain't there. We're pulling out, and left. And it would have been so much better. But he didn't do that. But the CIA took a massive, massive hit on that. CIA was totally wrong on the Shah of Iran when they said that the Ayatollah Khomeini didn't have that many followers, wouldn't be a threat. And here we are still, 45 years later, still dealing with the Iranian nut jobs that the CIA said wouldn't be a problem. CIA blew the Bay of Pigs, which almost got us into a war. Wherever you look, the CIA has been wrong. Now, I admit, and you have to admit this too if you're honest, they cannot say when they're right. Okay, we do have to agree that, right? That they can't say, oh, look, we foiled a plot here, or we saved an assassination there, or this bad thing was going to happen over here, because they would give up their sources. I understand that, but still, they have very, very little trust at this point. But the Secret Service, folks, I think we all agreed the Secret Service was beyond reproach. Now, going back, there was that thing during the Obama administration in South America where a bunch of Secret Service agents had some party that got out of hand. And I think some of them got arrested in a Latin American country and so forth. But I think most of us just kind of blew that off. But now, it looks like they were either utterly and totally incompetent at the Trump rally, or that they were in on it. And I'm not ready yet as a historian to say where I'm going with that, but I'm just saying it looks awfully suspicious. Well, at any rate, the Secret Service director, Kim Cheadle, finally resigned. She should have resigned the following weekend after that event and said, boy, we blew it, and I screwed up badly. But she didn't. So she resigned, I think, leaving a new word for incompetence, Cheadle, as in, man, I really cheatled that up. At any rate, now the Secret Service is telling Trump they can't protect him in big outdoor rallies. And temporarily, he's gone along with them and had a big indoor rally. Now, I'm wondering if they're going to come out and say, you know, President Trump, we can't protect you in these large indoor rallies either. Now, if they say that, I think he's going to say and go back to his outdoor rallies as well. Some of you have raised the issue of private security. I'm going to address that in just a minute. But I got to remind you one last time about our friends and our sponsors at Colonial Metals. Again, it's a hedge against inflation. You need to hedge yourselves against inflation. You need some silver and gold in your portfolio. No better place to get it than Colonial Metals at 1-800-805-4034. That's 1-800-805-4034. They're going to start you off with a self-directed IRA if you want, or if you want the hard metals themselves, they're going to start you off with a program that gives you a free safe and up to $10,000 in silver. So I want you to consider our pals at Colonial Metals, and that's 1-800-805-4034. Now, many of you have said, why doesn't Trump have his own security team? Why doesn't he just get a bunch of Delta Force guys and have his own security team? Sounds good. That's a real problem. In the first place, just think of the communications issues you have. These idiots down there couldn't keep their comms straight about some guy who had a rifle on a roof. Now imagine if there are other guys out there who have rifles on roofs who are good guys, but are not part of the Secret Service, and you're trying to go back and forth between them. Hey, is this guy one of yours? No, he's not. Oh, wait a minute, he is too. No, what roof are you talking about? It could be a disaster. Second of all, even, and that's assuming that the Secret Service would allow this, but I don't think they would allow anybody with a gun to be a part of a private security detail up there that they haven't fully vetted and are in control of. You know what I'm saying? To have them have private people out there armed could be a real disaster. So I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is they need to up their level of Secret Service security around President Trump. And remember, the stories came out now that many of these people were not real Secret Service agents. Many of them were auxiliaries and police, local police that were brought in, and they didn't have enough to staff those. Now, there is one theory out there. I'm going to share this with you. It's brought out by lawyer Robert Barnes, who can be a little conspiratorial. But his theory on this shooter is that this guy was groomed by the FBI or the CIA and told he was going to be a part of the security operations, and that he was kind of brought into this like, yeah, I'm going to help protect the president. Now, what really argues against that is that virtually all of his Gab account, which we have now found, we found his Gab account, suggests this guy is an anti-Trump nut, a lunatic, and certainly not somebody who thought he was there to help protect the president. How many shooters were there? I don't know. All sorts of stories are circulating out there. There was more than one shooter. Why did the Secret Service allow a guy with a gun to sit on a roof for 3 minutes when they had him in their sights? I don't know. My best guess is that they were afraid of being brought up on murder charges if anything at all went wrong. If this guy was one of them, if this guy was an innocent bystander. I mean, you know how the woke stuff goes these days, that they would bring people up on charges for any of this. So the bottom line is we have a lot more to learn about the Secret Service. We do know, however, in the congressional hearings that took place, this guy flew a drone over the area a couple of weeks earlier. Now, I happen to have a little bit of one step removed experience with the Secret Service. Back in 2008, when John McCain was running for president, I have a friend. He's actually a former student of mine who came back to the university to get a business degree. He came out of high school and he was mowing yards. He and a partner had a couple of lawnmowers and a trailer, and they started a landscaping business that grew and grew and grew until it became one of the most, if not the most, lucrative landscaping businesses in all of Dayton, Ohio, Montgomery County. And he came back to school in order to learn business, the business aspect of what he was doing. But he had to take my history class, which is how I came to know him. Anyway, we got to be friends over time. He was one of the investors in my film, Rockin' the Wall. Well, in 2008, I get an email from him, hey, would you like to attend this fundraiser for John McCain? And the guest will be President George W. Bush. I met President Bush in the Oval Office in 2007, along with Victor Davis Hanson and John Keegan and a couple of other guys. Gabor Borat, I think, was one. And we talked military history and strategy with President Bush for an hour and a half in the Oval Office. It was quite an honor. Whether you like Bush or not, it's an honor to be invited to the Oval Office. And I cherish that. So anyway, I knew Bush from that one meeting. So I said, sure, I don't like McCain, but he's better than Obama. I thought at the time. Turns out he really wasn't. But I thought he's better than Obama. So sure, I'll come to this fundraiser. So my former student told me what they did to his house before the president arrived in terms of security. He said a team came in. They went all the way around the outside limits of his property. They cut down any trees that might interfere with their own snipers, not trees, but the branches of trees, that they secured the whole perimeter. They interviewed all the neighbors to make sure nobody was a nutcase. They then went through his whole house, and he filled out a questionnaire. Do you have any guns? And he said, yes, I have 3 guns. And I can't remember what he said. I have 3 guns, and here are 2 of them, but I can't find this pistol. I have a pistol, but I can't find it. The Secret Service says, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. So on the day Bush arrived, now, by the way, this guy's garage had to be so sturdy, and they checked that out too, that it could hold the beast, the presidential limousine, which showed up with a medical van as well, in case there's any medical problems for the president, right? So 15 minutes before Bush was to arrive, the Secret Service came in the house again, and my friend said, well, you know, I never have found that gun. He said, don't worry about it. 15 minutes later, or 10 minutes later, just before Bush arrived, they came back and they had the pistol. And he goes, is this yours? He goes, yeah, where did you find that? So, well, we had these metal detectors, and we found it down. It had fallen behind a cabinet, and so they found it. So they go through a ton of prep just for any kind of presidential visit. Anyway, we'll see where this goes with the Secret Service. Now, one last reminder, because we're running out of time here. I want to remind you about the Wild World of History and the Wild World of Politics. At the Wild World of History, I have a full U.S. and world history curriculum for high schoolers. And as you might expect, the U.S. history tracks perfectly with my New York Times #1 bestseller, Up Patriots, History of the United States. There's 22 chapters in the book and 22 units in the curriculum, and I teach every unit in high production video with images and maps and everything else behind me, and you can get all of those too. So go to the wildworldofhistory.com and check it out. There's free samples, including a sample of me teaching the lesson on the U.S. Constitution era. And then we also have a full world history curriculum. The world history is 15 units, not 22. Both of these are year-long courses, 2 semesters. But the world history courses are bigger because I'm covering more space: Europe, Africa, Asia, Latin America. But they also have 15 videos. And the videos are a little bit longer, an hour to an hour and 15 minutes each. The U.S. videos are about 45 minutes to an hour each. Same thing. Folks, there's no license to expire with either of these curricula programs. No license to expire. So if you've got several kids, you can use it with all of your kids coming up. And if you don't make it in the course of teaching it in 1 year, say you want to go on a vacation in May or whatever, you're still about 1 or 2 units short of completing the course, you can take it with you. It's digital, it's downloadable, it's all yours as long as you want it. So check it out at the website, The Wild World of History. Now, at the Wild World of Politics, you can sign up for the Insider program, $6 a month, and that gives you access to about a half dozen ongoing video programs, including my series Globalism, Then and Now, that tracks perfectly with my Patriots History of Globalism, my recent book. You can get both the Globalism book and my Patriots History, a combined offer, autographed, shipped to you, right, on the site. So check it out. But anyway, sign up for the Insider and you'll get my political commentary, about 15 to 20 minutes at a shot, 3 times a week, as well as all of these videos, totaling about, 30 hours of videos. We've got Integrity, a series with Winston Churchill, Globalism, Then and Now, Reagan, the American president, and many, many more. So check it out. Well, folks, it's been fun Thanks for joining me again here on Wake Up Patriots. I expect I'll be back next week. The hits just keep on coming here. So stay wild. See you later.